Bahamut, the king of Eidolons, the Platinum Dragon, the father of summoned monsters, the old man with 7 yellow canaries, and the weird dinosaur dog thing in Super Mario RPG. Odds are, you've heard of Bahamut before. He's a pretty big deal, no matter what universe he appears in. But where did he come from? What's the real-life inspiration for this king of dragons? I'm Lorekeeper Wilveren, and today we're answering the question, who is Bahamut? Let's start with his origins in a couple of fantasy worlds. Many probably believe that it was Dungeons & Dragons that created Bahamut. The being that came to be known as Bahamut was originally introduced in 1975 in the supplementary rulebook Greyhawk as the Dragon King or the Platinum Dragon. He wasn't given the name Bahamut until the first edition Monster Manual, published in 1977. In the Faerunian pantheon, Bahamut is a good-aligned lesser deity. He is the dragon god of justice and subservient deity to Torm, god of law. He is also the king of good-aligned dragons, and while there are an abundance of dragons with metallic scales, Bahamut is the only known platinum dragon. Even in D&D lore, Bahamut has a number of origin stories, including that he and his antithesis Tiamat simply coalesced from the primordial chaos at the beginning of time. The most commonly accepted origin story, however, both in the world and by players, is that he was created from the greatest and most powerful of all dragons, Io. According to one myth written in the 3.5 edition supplemental sourcebook Races of the Dragon, Io's first child was named Vorel, meaning beautiful in Draconic. Though he was simple-minded, he was said to be absolutely perfect in scale and form, hence the name. Next, Io created 2 other dragons, one male and one female, intending them to grow up to become mates and birth other children that combine the greatest traits of each. These 2 were Bahamut and Tiamat. Unfortunately for Io's plans, the 2 were bitter rivals from birth and would never willingly mate. After many failed attempts to make herself look better and her brother look worse, Tiamat hatched a truly evil plan. She killed their elder brother Vorel and framed Bahamut for the deed. Io investigated thoroughly and discovered the truth, however, and as much as it pained him to do it, he banished Tiamat from his presence forever. As a result, Tiamat turned fully to hate and evil, and her brother Bahamut became a paragon of good and order to oppose her. So it is said in the tales that Io lost 3 of his children, the first to death, the second to evil, and the last to good. Another commonly held belief told in D&D's 4th edition mythology is that Io created dragons and the Dragonborn long before he created Bahamut and Tiamat. In fact, he didn't create them at all, at least not intentionally. In that tale, Io was struck down in a war against the Primordials, godlike beings of chaos and raw elemental power that existed since before the creation of the world itself. Io was cut in half. Bahamut, king of the mostly good-aligned metallic dragons, and Tiamat, queen of the mostly evil-aligned chromatic dragons, were said to be born from different sides of Io's personality and the 2 severed halves of his flesh upon his death. When he walks among non-dragon beings, Bahamut most often appears under the guise of an old human or demi-human man in peasant clothing, accompanied by 7 yellow canaries or other songbirds. These birds are actually the 7 great gold worms, the closest and most powerful of all his servants and friends. In his true form, Bahamut is a massive dragon, 180 feet long in fact, with a tail as long as his body. His scales are the color of platinum with a bluish sheen, and while his eyes are blue, it's said the exact shade of them seems to change, possibly according to his mood. So that's Bahamut in Dungeons & Dragons, though of course there's much more we could talk about there. Additionally, there is some conflicting information, which is to be expected given the number of authors who have developed the lore over the years. For now though, let's move on to his existence in Final Fantasy. Bahamut appears throughout most of the games as a powerful summoned monster. But due to the Final Fantasy series' nature of being self-contained stories and universes, there's no common origin for it. Regardless of theories of Final Fantasy games being connected in one long timeline, we can say for certain that the Bahamut we encounter in each game is not always the same entity. The first Final Fantasy game was released in 1987, well after Bahamut was established in D&D. While I can't find any hard confirmation, it is commonly believed, and in my opinion highly probable, that Bahamut in Final Fantasy was inspired, at least partially, by Bahamut in D&D. While his design differs from game to game, Bahamut's color scheme generally features dark purples or blues, vastly different from the Platinum Dragon. Bahamut in Final Fantasy is rarely worshipped and not usually a god, but is sometimes a king and is highly revered. In some games, Bahamut isn't a character at all and has no backstory or origin. He's just a powerful summon spell that shows up, does his special attack Mega Flare, and disappears. In the original Final Fantasy, he wasn't even a summoned monster since summon magic didn't exist yet. He was the Dragon King, who would allow your characters to rank up to the stronger version of their class. In Final Fantasy IV, one of my personal favorites, when Cecil and his party explore the Red Moon, they can discover Bahamut there, where he is praised as the true king and father of all summoned monsters, or Eidolons, depending on the version you're playing. In Final Fantasy X, Bahamut is the manifestation of the dream of a child from an ancient destroyed city who was sealed in stone 1,000 years ago in a special ritual. And that's literally all there is to it. Bahamut isn't even real in this one. He's literally a dream made physical through the power of summon magic, which is how it works in FF10. In Final Fantasy XIV, Bahamut is one of the first children of Midgard Sormer, an ancient godlike dragon who came to Aetheris from a now destroyed world. He commanded the armies of Mericidia against the Allagan Empire 5,000 years before the events of the game, and was killed in that war. Mind you, the Elder Primal Bahamut that broke free from the Lesser Moon early in FF14's story is not the actual Bahamut, since summoning magic in FF14 works very differently. It would be more accurate to call it conjuration or creation magic, since the entity that is summoned is actually just a construct shaped by the faith and will of the summoner. But for plot reasons, the ones who are taught summoning magic don't realize that, and believe they are summoning a discrete being. While Bahamut is pretty much always a dragon and pretty much always a big deal, he's never the same entity, which is why I say there's no single origin for him we can draw on here. Again, most evidence suggests he's inspired by D&D's Bahamut, and despite being one of the most iconic beings in the entire franchise, he's like summoning magic itself. Something cool and powerful that we associate with Final Fantasy that tends to function kind of differently from game to game and doesn't necessarily have much universally applicable lore. So, Final Fantasy's Bahamut likely traces back to D&D's Bahamut. Did D&D create Bahamut? Is there another story or real-world myth that Gary Gygax and Rob Kuntz drew from when they wrote about the Platinum Dragon? Well, sort of. The entity himself is, as far as I can tell, unique, an original creation. There is no dragon, serpent, deity, or anything else I can find with a name similar to Bahamut which shares any of the traits or domains of D&D's Platinum Dragon, which could explain why the Platinum Dragon had no name originally. The name itself, however, definitely has an origin we can trace, and it's both simple and complicated, and has nothing to do with dragons. The original Bahamut, or Bahamut, comes from the cosmography of Zachariah al-Qazwini, a Persian cosmographer and geographer of Arab ancestry. Al-Qazwini lived from 1203 to 1283 AD, and his family line reaches back to Anas bin Malik, a companion of Islamic prophet Muhammad. Cosmography is essentially the ongoing study of understanding how the universe is structured and how it works. In Al-Qazwini's day, the concepts and ideas used in cosmography are very different from how we see things today. Al-Qazwini stated that Bahamut is a fish, or whale, of such gargantuan proportions that all the oceans of the world would be like a mustard seed or grain of sand in its nostrils. We say fish or whale because the word used could translate to either, and it's impossible to know which was intended. This creature is also known as Balhut and Lutia. On the back of Bahamut stands a great ox named Kuyatha or Kujata. On the back of the ox sits a massive gemstone, and on the gemstone stands a great angel. Said angel is holding up the planet Earth, suspended in the heavens above the massive dark sea below. Here's where things get weird. The name Bahamut seems to come from the word behemoth, which you may recognize as a massive land-walking creature in the Bible, commonly believed to be some sort of ox. The name Kuyatha is believed to be a corruption or misrendering of the Hebrew name Leviathan, which in the Bible is described as an incredibly massive sea creature. Given all of this, it's thought by historians that there may have been some confusion and things got twisted around in the telling of Arabic myths centuries ago. It's impossible to say for sure whether it's the ox or the fish who is truly named Behemoth in Abrahamic myth, and therefore is the source of the name Bahamut. Same for Leviathan or Kujata. Interestingly enough, all of these other names appear in Final Fantasy as well. The Behemoth is another iconic Final Fantasy monster, extremely powerful and dangerous. Leviathan is another summoned monster, depicted as a massive sea serpent that appears in multiple games. Kujata is a summoned monster exclusive to Final Fantasy VII, which takes the form of a huge bull. This wouldn't be the first time Final Fantasy grabbed a name they thought was cool, took a bit of inspiration from it, and then ran with it to make their own thing. Check out my video on the Ahriman race of monsters to see what I mean. Mind you, it's not necessarily a bad thing to do that, especially when you're pulling from ancient myths and folklore. Bahamut in D&D isn't holding up anything except a strict code of law, and looks absolutely nothing like a fish, whale, or any other sea creature. He isn't connected in any way with the structure of the world or the universe, aside from being a minor deity in it. So while the Platinum Dragon is clearly not inspired by the Bahamut of Arabic mythology, the name itself is, and we know this for a fact. And since Final Fantasy's Bahamut seems to take inspiration from D&D's Bahamut, we can also trace his origins to the fish that carries the bowl, that carries the gemstone, that carries the angel, that carries the planet. Thanks for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll be back soon with more lore for you. Until next time.